Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Jacob, and if there's one thing I've learned from life, it's this. You can give someone your time, your money, your love, but that doesn't mean they'll give anything back. Sometimes, the more you give, the more people forget how much it cost you to give it. I used to be the most important person in my stepdaughter's life. I wasn't her biological father, but I loved her like she came from my own blood. I poured everything I had into her life because I believed love was more than DNA. But all of that changed. Somewhere along the line, she stopped seeing me as her father. Everything made sense to me on her wedding day, and that's why I'm here today. Let me take you back to where it all started. I hope this story helps you see that you're not alone if you're going through something similar. First, let me take you back to how I met Madison, my stepdaughter's mother. She came into my law firm one rainy afternoon. I remember because she looked like someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her clothes were damp, and when she sat down across from me, she didn't even know where to begin. Eventually, she told me everything. She'd been stuck in an abusive relationship for years. Every time she tried to leave, her boyfriend would beat her until she was too scared to move. He threatened to kill her more than once. And what made it worse was she was pregnant while all this was going on. That pregnancy kept her trapped. She didn't have family she could run to. She didn't have money. And she didn't feel safe. After she gave birth to her daughter, Ella, something in her changed. She said she looked at her baby and realized she couldn't raise her in that kind of darkness. That's when she found the courage to call the police. They came, arrested the boyfriend on the spot, but the fight wasn't over. She needed to press charges, domestic abuse, assault, threats, and more, and she had no idea how to go about it. That's how she ended up in my office. Now, let me be clear, our firm doesn't come cheap. We deal with serious cases, and we take pride in doing things by the book. But when I looked at Madison, I saw someone who didn't need pity. She needed someone in her corner for once. She couldn't afford our services, not even close. Still, I took on her case. I made it my personal mission to make sure that man paid for what he did. And he did. We built a solid case, and by the time we were done, he was behind bars where he belonged. But I didn't stop there. I filed a cease and desist order to make sure he couldn't come anywhere near her or the baby again. I made sure she and Ella were protected. The case dragged on for months, and during that time, I got to know Madison more than just as a client. I started looking at the little baby, Ella, like she deserved better. A safe home. A man who would protect her and guide her. I didn't know what kind of future Madison and I could have, but I knew for a fact that I wanted to be there for that little girl. I saw her as someone who needed a father. And yeah, I can already hear people in the comments saying, "Bro, you're a simp." That's fine. Say what you want. But if you saw what I saw back then, you'd understand. But keep watching. Madison and I started dating shortly after her case ended. At first, I kept things respectful because I didn't want her to feel like I was taking advantage of her vulnerability. But over time, we grew close. Ella was just a baby then, barely learning how to sit up, and I saw how much love Madison had for her. Eventually, our relationship grew serious, and we got married. When I say I raised Ella from before she could talk, I mean that literally. I was there for her first words, her first steps, her first fevers, and I remember staying up at night rocking her to sleep. She was mine in every way that mattered, except biologically. Those years were beautiful. The simple joy of watching her grow. I never thought of her as my stepdaughter. I thought of her as my daughter. Period. My wife, Madison, and I had our ups and downs like any couple, but when it came to Ella, I never held back. But life has a cruel way of flipping the script. Ella eventually grew into a young woman. She was smart, confident, and ready to take on the world. I had just finished paying for her college tuition. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't mind. I wanted her to be able to stand on her own 2 feet without the burden of student loans. I thought she knew what that meant. I thought she understood the love behind that kind of sacrifice. But gradually, everything changed. She became distant, less warm. Conversations got shorter, and her appreciation turned into a kind of polite indifference. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but eventually, I found out what caused it. She had learned the truth, that I wasn't her biological father. From that moment, everything I had done seemed to fade in her eyes. I wasn't Dad anymore. I became Jacob. All those years, none of it seemed to matter anymore. It was like I had been erased with one sentence: "He's not your real dad." And just like that, I became a stranger in my own home. Ella came over to our place one evening bursting with energy. She sat us down, me and her mother, and told us she was getting married to her college sweetheart. I still remember the way her eyes lit up when she said his name. She seemed genuinely happy, and I won't lie, that moment touched me. I had raised that girl. Watching her grow up and now come into her own like this, it was emotional. I smiled, told her I was proud of her, and I gave her my full blessing. I really wanted her to be happy. From that moment on, things moved quickly. Madison started talking about venues, dresses, guest lists. You know how it is. Once the wedding bug bites, it's like a freight train. Now, because of the nature of my job, I spent a lot of time buried in case files, client meetings, and court dates. I run a law firm, and there's always something urgent pulling me in one direction or another. So Madison took it upon herself to handle the planning. At least, that's what she said. I agreed. It made sense. I trusted her to coordinate the details while I handled the finances behind the scenes. But here's the thing. Madison doesn't work. She hasn't worked a day since we got married. That's not me complaining. It was a choice I made. I told her I would take care of everything so she could focus on the home. And I kept that promise. So when she said she'd plan the wedding, what that really meant was I was still paying for most of the things. She'd make calls, attend fittings with Ella, book things, but the money? All of it came from my pocket. Still, I didn't complain. I didn't even mind. This was Ella's big day. And I won't pretend. I had expectations. I didn't ask to be the center of attention, but deep down, I figured I'd at least have a place of honor. I thought I'd walk her down the aisle. If not that, then maybe a heartfelt mention, a toast, a simple gesture to acknowledge the man who stood by her all her life. That wasn't too much to hope for, was it? But as we got closer to the wedding day, I started to notice something strange. I was being left out of certain conversations. Decisions were being made without me. And any time I brought up the wedding, I'd get vague answers or brushed off with, "Don't worry, everything's under control." The day of Ella's wedding was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life. I arrived early, dressed in the suit Madison helped me pick out weeks before. I even had a speech written down in case I was asked to say a few words. There was this quiet sense of joy in me, like maybe despite all the distance that had come between us after she found out I wasn't her biological father, we could have this one moment together. I didn't even realize how much I was counting on it until everything shattered. When I saw her walking down the aisle, my heart stopped. Not because she looked beautiful, which she did, but because the man holding her arm was her biological father. The same man who once never feed her, shelter her, or help her through anything. That was the man she chose to walk beside on one of the most important days of her life. And me? I was just a guest. I wasn't acknowledged. As the ceremony went on, it became clear I wasn't needed here. She didn't mention me in her speech. Her husband didn't say anything either. All their attention was wrapped around the man who had done nothing but share DNA with her. And I stood there in silence. I pulled Madison aside when I finally had a moment. I asked her calmly, "Did you know about this?" She looked me in the eye and didn't even flinch. She said yes. Not only did she know, but she and Ella had planned it together. They brought him in without telling me because, according to them, he deserved the chance to be part of her big day. I didn't say a word back. I just stood there, nodding slowly. I watched the rest of the ceremony like a stranger at a movie. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see it all. I needed to witness how easily people can erase you from a story you helped write. No one noticed the man in the back who gave up years of his life to raise a child that wasn't his. I didn't cause a scene. Since I was no longer recognized, I knew it was time to stop playing a role in a story that didn't include me anymore. So after the wedding, things got real quiet. Ella never reached out to me. Not a call. Not a text. No explanation, no apology, nothing. And honestly, that silence told me everything I needed to know. She made her choice, and I wasn't part of it. Now, before the wedding, I had set a few things aside for her. I wasn't just raising her, I was planning for her future. In my living trust, there was a significant amount of money marked for her, something to help her start her married life on solid footing. On top of that, there was a house, fully paid for, that I intended to transfer to her name after the wedding. I never told her directly about these things, but I had a feeling Madison did. She must have whispered it into Ella's ears, planting the idea that once she was married, all that would come rolling in. But after what happened at that wedding, after standing there like a stranger watching another man walk the daughter I raised down the aisle, I felt something break inside me. I realized I couldn't just keep giving pieces of myself to people who didn't value them. So I held back. I didn't move the money. I didn't sign over the house. I did nothing. I waited. It didn't take long before my wife, Madison, started pressing me about it. So, when are you going to transfer the money and the house to Ella? She asked, like it was just some formality. I looked at her, calm and clear, and said, tell her real father to transfer them. That was all I said. She lost it. She called me a hater, a manipulator, said I was punishing Ella for being honest about her feelings. But I didn't argue or try to defend myself. I didn't explain because by that point I realized there was no point in trying to justify myself to people who only cared about what I could give them, not who I was to them. And that silence? It was louder than any fight we could have had. A month after the wedding, Ella finally saw the reality of what she had done. It was a slow, painful realization that came to her bit by bit. At first, I wasn't sure if she'd ever come to that point, but I should have known. People rarely appreciate something until it's gone. One morning, I get this call. It's from Ella. I didn't expect to hear from her, certainly not after everything that had happened. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. And the moment I said hello, I could hear it in her voice, the tears, the desperation. She was crying, and it wasn't just a few sniffles. She was choking on her words, clearly beside herself. Jacob, I need your help, she said, barely able to get the words out between sobs. I asked her what was going on, and then it all came spilling out. She told me how her biological father, the same man she'd chosen to walk her down the aisle just weeks before, had convinced her and her new husband to hand over all their money. He promised them that he had a great investment opportunity, something that would set them up for life. He made it sound so legitimate, like he had the inside track to wealth, to financial freedom. She said she and her husband, desperate and naive, had given him everything. All their savings. All the money they had left after the wedding. The man they trusted turned out to be the very thing I always feared he'd be. A liar, a thief, and a con man. What did he do with their money? Took it all, and ran. They were left with nothing. I'm not talking about a couple $100. We're talking about everything they had. Then she realized what she'd done to me. She called me up, asking for help. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about me being angry or feeling betrayed anymore. It wasn't even about getting back at her or punishing her. It was about this. She didn't value me until it was too late. She didn't see me for who I really was until the man she had chosen over me had failed her. Now, I was her last resort. And honestly, that hurt. It hurt more than I'd ever let on. So, I gave her my final words, and I meant every one of them. I said, I don't wish to hold the role of a father in your life anymore. You never valued my sacrifices. It wasn't what I wanted to say, but it was what needed to be said. She had chosen her real father over me, and now she was asking me to save her from the consequences of that choice. But I wasn't her savior anymore. I wasn't the man she could run to when things went wrong. Since then, Ella's tried. She sent me messages, texts here and there, apologizing for everything. She tells me she was wrong, that she sees what I did for her, but I don't respond. I don't want to. What's the point? She made her decision. Madison, my wife, saw what was happening. After a while, she threatened to divorce me. She said I was being unreasonable, that I was punishing Ella for mistakes that weren't entirely hers. But when she saw I didn't care if she left, she changed. Now, she respects my decision. She knows I'm not going to be the one to fix this. Ella's story is one of regret, but it's also a story of lessons. And trust me, I've learned them all. As the story winds down, I want to leave you with the lessons I've learned from all of this. If I can share anything from what I went through, it's these 4 things. First, people only value what they understand. Just because you gave your all doesn't mean they saw it. I spent years raising Ella, but in the end, it didn't matter. She never understood the depth of my sacrifices. She didn't understand the struggles I went through to give her the life she had. She didn't see the love and the effort I poured into raising her. To her, my role wasn't as valuable as her biological father's. The lesson? Just because you give your all doesn't mean the person you're doing it for sees it, understands it, or even appreciates it. Sometimes, people only value what they get, not what you give. Second, being a provider doesn't guarantee being appreciated. I used to think that if I provided everything for her, if I made sure she had everything she needed, I would earn her respect and love. But that wasn't the case. Ella and I didn't share blood, and that fact became more important to her than anything else. The emotional bond one thought we had was easily overshadowed by the fact that she was biologically tied to someone else. You could be the best provider in the world, but if there's no emotional connection, it doesn't matter. When push came to shove, Ella's biological father was the one she turned to, and my years of being there for her didn't mean a thing. Third, sometimes silence is louder than confrontation. My absence taught more than my words ever could. When all of this went down, I didn't confront Ella. I didn't try to explain why I felt hurt. Instead, I pulled away. I let her make her choices and didn't try to fight her for them. I realized that sometimes silence says everything that words can't. When I withdrew and stopped trying to force my place in her life, it hit her harder than anything I could have said. She didn't want to hear what I had to say. She needed to see my actions. And finally, never pour yourself into someone who hasn't proven they'll protect what you pour. This is something I wish I'd learned earlier. I spent so much of my time and energy making sure Ella was okay that I never really stopped to ask if she was going to do the same for me. I put everything into her, but when the time came for her to show any gratitude or protect what I had given her, she let it slip away. I gave her my trust, my support, and my love, but I never got that back. In the end, I realized that you can't pour yourself into someone who's just going to let your efforts spill away without a second thought. People don't appreciate what they don't protect. So, yeah, I learned these lessons the hard way. But if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Sometimes, the people you invest the most in won't see your value until it's too late. And you can't make them appreciate what you've given them. You can only control how much you give and who you give it to. And if they don't protect that, if they don't appreciate it, then it's time to let go and walk away.